This is the Borderless Crypto Podcast. Hello everyone, I'm your host, George Manlove, and in this series I bring you exceptional investors, entrepreneurs, hustlers, and thought leaders from the cryptocurrency space. This time I have Tory Reiss, co-founder of the TrustToken Asset Tokenization Platform. They're the guys behind TrueUSD, one of the biggest stablecoins on the market. Tory and I talk about the ways in which you can use TrueUSD to easily transact internationally or to simply earn passive income. Among many other things, Tory also explains what sets TrueUSD apart from all other stablecoins and how TrueUSD combats money laundering. This was a conversation that sparked me to think even more about the importance of stablecoins and how they're accelerating the removal of existing financial borders. Please note that anything that I or my guests say in these talks is for informational purposes only and should not be treated as investment advice. And although during daylight I'm part of the team behind the crypto lending platform Nexo, at night when I do these talks, I share only my personal thoughts which in no way represent Nexo's opinions. Now it's time to get the podcast started in 3, 2, 1. So Tory, I'm happy to have you today on the show. For everybody else, Tory Reiss is the founder and the co-founder of the Trust Tokenization Platform, which has been renowned for launching one of the biggest USD-pegged stablecoins. But before we dive deeper into TrueUSD, the Trust Tokenization Platform, Tory, can you share a little bit about yourself, about your personal professional path, and how did you end up in the crypto space working on one of the biggest USD-pegged stablecoins?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my background's a good example of how, you can really, you don't have to stay in one area or define yourself too narrowly, because really, whatever you're curious about, you can learn almost anything nowadays. The internet really has made it so you can be a lifelong learner. And if you look at my path, I went to school in Chicago, and my studies revolved around entrepreneurship and international studies and behavioral economics, neuroscience, like all these topics that really have nothing to do with finance whatsoever. I started my career in enterprise software. So the first two companies I worked for were very, very focused on B2B enterprise software. The first being Microsoft, where I spent, a good chunk of my early career. And then the second being a startup in San Francisco called Lob that was also selling APIs to the enterprise. So I caught the crypto bug towards the end of college when I first started buying Bitcoin. And obviously, once you have Bitcoin, and you kind of follow the industry news over time, and I saw how it was evolving, I was really excited about it, but I didn't really make the move into the crypto space or working in it full time until I saw what happened with Ethereum and the way the world was changing in terms of this sort of, gaining a global compute layer or a global database layer that, we could work on from virtually, any country. It represented a paradigm shift in computing that I thought was very exciting. And particularly as it relates to finance. I'd always had a fascination with personal finance and financial technology. So this company ended up being the perfect intersection of all those interests. And that was that. We started working on what is now TrustToken in 2017. And then 2018 was when we launched TrueUSD.
And what was the thought process of starting a company that is to tokenize other assets? How did you first come up with hey, let's tokenize the US dollar, or walk me through that process of how did you come up with the idea?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. I think, when at the time when we saw what was happening with Ethereum and, the ICO boom of 2017, what became apparent when we took a step back was that there was a new financial system emerging on the blockchain. So, we saw exchanges and OTC desks and new forms of derivatives and lending products. Like we saw it kind of cropping up everywhere. And so we did this exercise where we looked at traditional markets and we tried to think of parallels and what would change in this new paradigm. And the first thing, we observed when we looked at, for example, the NASDAQ or other traditional exchanges, is that the majority of the value that's represented on those exchanges are hard assets or real assets, things like real estate, commodities, et cetera. And so the kind of following that chain of thought, we thought, okay, well, if Ethereum is going to be this world computer and it's running the world's most important computations, and many of those relate to financial services, there's going to need to be a way to legally and technically represent real world assets on a blockchain. And so then following that chain of logic, we thought, well, what would be what asset or what financial instrument is the most well understood, widely adopted instrument in the world? And it was pretty clear at that time that it was the US dollar. And so we thought, this is going to be a great proof of concept, that if we can prove to the world that this idea of like representing a dollar on the blockchain, then we could represent any asset. So we saw it as like a first step in just proving out the thesis that we could represent real world assets on the blockchain.
All right. And in terms of company building, what was the process? Because I know that you have raised capital from some of the top investors in Silicon Valley. So did you first launch some sort of MVP, or did you have something prepared, already running, or it was like straight raising capital and then building it?
Yeah, I mean, I think people should know that, the reality of startups are way messier than they appear from the outside. This company started in a totally different space. Like we pivoted into blockchain, and it was very painful in the beginning. We didn't have many resources. There was only 5 of us. Not even so long ago, like just over a year ago. There was just 5 people, and we were just working away, and we didn't really have a chance to have an MVP, because as soon as our product went live, it meant that basically anyone in the world could use it. So we just sort of we put together all of the pieces. It was very much what I would call MacGyver, in the sense that we took a lot of it was like toothpicks and bubblegum in the beginning, right? Like a lot of manual processes, a lot of just hard work behind the scenes to get our, the first version of TrueUSD out the door. And with that being said, we had to be absolutely, the most important things is security and compliance. So even if there were lots of manual processes for us on the back end, in terms of how we interacted with the banks or how we interact with our users, we still had to make sure that we had world-class security and world-class, bank grade compliance. So we couldn't skimp on those, which is, so that was very tough. That was like our biggest investment area early on. But it's the way startups go is you go from, we're working out of a house. We were literally working out of the same house that we were living in. And that was both office and where we lived, to once we had our product out the door and we had traction, it then became a lot easier to raise capital. And then we were able to, today we now have 31 people, both here and in Asia, and a great office here in Soma. But it's not easy. You might be you might be sleeping on a couch for a year or 2 years before you actually get traction and have enough capital to move into your own space.
But then it's totally worth it because you start building something big, and TrueUSD is already quite big. It's, if I'm not mistaken, it's the second largest USD pegged stablecoin after the notorious Tether. So can you share a little more about TrueUSD? Like, okay, you say it's kind of the most obvious asset to tokenize, but why so? Like, what is the needs that TrueUSD solves? How do people use it? And what deficiencies does TrueUSD solve?
Yeah, that's another good question. So, the way you can think about it is, the reason why the US dollar was a great, at the time we thought it was a great move because anyone anywhere in the world knows what a US dollar is, almost anywhere. I shouldn't say 100%, but most places in the world recognize and accept the US dollar. That was our logic at the time, was that, okay, if we tokenize that, then we don't have to explain what the token is because it's essentially a dollar and people understand what a dollar is. What we only realized, after the fact was that, the product we created was far more useful than we originally imagined. The first use case for USD-backed stablecoin was trading. Traders were using it because they could only trade crypto to crypto, and they needed a stable store of value during volatile markets. Now, that's just a tiny, in the grand scheme of things, that's a tiny use case. And by tiny, it's still a multi-billion-dollar market today. It's still about a $3 billion market, but it's still relatively small.
Right.
What we've learned over time is that actually the markets beyond trading and beyond crypto are massive, because what we've actually created is a new payment rail. What's very important is that we've helped increase the velocity of money, the velocity of capital, and we've offered an alternative way to move value that's outside of the control of the traditional banking system. So traditional banks, which they've been the gatekeepers for time immemorial, they've been able to charge whatever fees they want on FX, so conversion between multiple currencies, or if you want to move money internationally, they pretty much set the terms. But with TrueUSD, if you want to send money to anyone anywhere in the world, you can do so in a matter of seconds and pay about 2 cents on average. That's the transaction fee on Ethereum. And so it's really, in many ways, it's a very powerful tool, because now capital can be moved more efficiently. Like if you're a lender, you can raise money in the US and deploy it in Indonesia the same day, right? That's never been possible. Or if you're doing remittances, the applications are so broad across financial services that we're now we're thinking much more broadly about how this technology can be applied, and we're also going to be adding many more currencies to our offerings, and we think that's just the start. Currencies is just the start.
But okay, that makes total sense, and I've been thinking about the same thing. When a crypto equivalent of a currency, like a crypto US dollar, has so many advantages over the traditional US dollar, right? As you said, you can send it very cheaply, you can send it very fast, locally, internationally. In that train of thought, and specifically since you're saying you're going to be tokenizing these more currencies out there, do you think that in the not so distant future, like all fiat currencies will be essentially some sort of stable coins on the blockchain?
So first off, one of the common confusions is when people say the blockchain. I think the reason why it's worth pointing that out is I think that there will be multiple blockchains, for better or for worse. JP Morgan has illustrated this, that their coin will be on a private blockchain, for example. So right. Yes, technically that's on quote unquote like the blockchain or a blockchain, but it's not a public blockchain. What I do believe that public blockchains are better than private because they solve a larger problem that JP Morgan's chain won't solve, which is the visibility of the data. Right now, it's actually an incredibly powerful thing to be able to have those transactions be public. I think the perfect version though is a public blockchain that allows some amount of privacy. So I think like if you want corporations to start transacting, so for example, like if we have a use case with Microsoft or with an SAP customer that relates to how their customers move money for receivables or payments to publishers, which, and these are real use cases that are being explored right now. They want privacy for those transactions, but they're okay with, it being public for, scenarios that aren't related to their affairs. So I think that's where things like zero knowledge proofs, like ZK snarks, can come in really useful, because you can then have some transactions that are private and maybe only visible to, let's say, a company and its audit partner like Ernst & Young, and then have the majority of other transactions between the general public remain on a public blockchain. So that way we can all rely on a single single chain, but just use different technologies to sort of adjust the level of privacy. And I think that's more what the future looks like, rather than today where, only a few people have access to that data and they typically can't be trusted. Unfortunately, that's what history has shown us. Right.
Okay. No, that is very interesting. And so what would be, would people still have any motive, any incentive to be using traditional currencies, or would it all become, especially when Ethereum introduces zero knowledge proofs, do you think that this will become the standard for all currencies?
Right. So yeah, to your point, I guess I didn't answer the original question. I do think that it's inevitable that if not blockchain, a similar technology will be standardized. I do believe digital cash, most people don't realize it, but most cash today is already digital. Right. I think this is just improving upon it. And the benefit of a blockchain is it acts as a shared database. And I think it's one of the few technologies that people can have faith in and use as a shared database. And I think for that reason, I think it might be the earliest adopted technology for digital cash. And so I do think, we will see within the next, it might even be this year, but I would say at least within the next few years, we will start to see sovereign nations issuing their currency on a blockchain. So that's my answer. Is I think it will go that direction. I can't say if the whole world will go that direction, but I do believe that some number of governments are going to make that decision. I think it's going to happen sooner than people think.
Okay. And then when it comes to the use cases of TrueUSD, like you said, you were very you didn't understand when you initially started the size of TrueUSD when it comes to payments, Are people, do you think that and do you have such data or knowledge that people are already using TrueUSD to I don't know, for remittances or for other purposes outside of trading? Or do you think that today the main use case for TrueUSD is still trading?
Yeah, I think the majority is still trading. However, we know for a fact that it's being used now for a number of other use cases. For example, we know that there are companies that right now are paying their employees payroll in TrueUSD. And it makes perfect sense why that would be, because if you are more and more often it's common that a company is distributed or remote or has teams that are around the world, and it's incredibly expensive for an employer to use traditional payroll providers to pay employees all around the world, especially if you're a smaller business. Let's say you only have 50 or 100 employees. You don't have the resources of a multinational corporation to have bank accounts in every single country where you have employees. So paying in TrueUSD costs nothing. It's super easy, and wherever they are, that they'll be able to convert that TrueUSD back to something that has any utility. Now, something we're working on is making sure that everyone can use their TrueUSD in whatever way they want, whether that's spending on products like through a debit card. We think that that's an obvious next step. Investing, saving and earning interest, lending the money out, getting loans. We want that all those services to be available, and already a lot of that's happening. Even if you look at Nexo, Nexo just launched a fantastic product where any user of TrueUSD can deposit their coins, and they have full liquidity, so there's no lockup, but they earn 6.5% interest, which blows away the Fed funds rate of 2.5% that we have here in the United States. And this is a long way of saying that these use cases are already happening. So whether it's individuals using it just to save and store money or send it, or it's businesses paying employees, or businesses using it for remittances, we know because we've talked to our customers that these are happening. But what matters to us is that they're just they might be early adopters. We need to figure out how do we build software and make it easier for entire industries to adopt the technology. And that that hasn't happened yet, but that's what we're working towards.
So how does it work today? I mean, what if we now have somebody who's listening and who realizes, hey, I want to start paying my employees with TrueUSD because they're international, or maybe I wanna deposit some, convert some USD to TrueUSD and deposit it on Nexo to earn 6.5 instead of 2%. How does it work today? How can I get TrueUSD?
Yeah, that's a great question. So today, the easiest way to get TrueUSD is probably using our app if you have US dollars. So there's two main ways to get it today. And this is something we're actually investing heavily in. We want to make it 10 or 100 times easier to get TrueUSD. Okay. But today, if you go to app.trusttoken.com, that's our secure web application. And so that's where you can take dollars and convert them into TrueUSD. You can purchase one for one, so there's no fees. You simply send a wire. We have the easiest both purchase and redemption process in the industry. So you verify your identity, and then you can make a purchase, or you can redeem and get your dollars out one for one. So that's with dollars. If you're using crypto, then right now we're traded on almost 100 exchanges. So any number of our partners are good. We have the most volume and liquidity, obviously, on Binance, but we work very closely with many other exchanges, and are constantly adding new partners in that regard as well. So depending on how you want to make the change, those tend to be the best ways. Now, businesses tend to use OTC desks, and we work with about 15 different OTC desks, so we're supported almost everywhere. But we're, like I said, we're working on expanding the ways you can get TrueUSD and make it even easier.
And anyone can get TrueUSD, right? I mean, whether you're obviously in the States, but do you have certain limitations, or anyone can just go to app? What was the website?
App.trusttoken.com.
Right. Anyone can go there, and basically you wire funds from your bank account, right?
That's right. Yeah. So it's anyone with a bank account anywhere in the world. So you don't even necessarily have to have US dollars. You can send and have your bank convert it. Can use that app to buy TrueUSD, and we'll be launching additional currencies and support for also potentially for crypto and purchasing with other currencies. All of that is coming. It's all in the pipeline.
Okay. All right. And with that in mind, would be curious to learn more about how do you compare TrustToken to other stablecoins? Because obviously there is a ton of them, right? They're at some point I thought, they're growing like mushrooms. Everyone is starting his own stablecoin. Yeah. No, seriously. Sometimes I'm like, I don't understand, to be honest, myself, why so many people are involved in the space. But obviously, there's big players, there's small players. How do you compare the Trust Token to other fiat-backed stablecoins, and then obviously as well to algorithmic stablecoins.
Yeah. So we, algorithmic stablecoins, none of them have launched yet, but crypto collateralized stablecoins, obviously the only player in the game today is Maker and DAI. And MakerDAI, we think is awesome. I mean, we think it's a great project, great team. We actually work with them very closely, and they're adding multi-collateral support soon. And TrueUSD is going to be part of that bundle. So there's actually a lot of collaboration there. In terms of fiat-backed, the way that we've been able to win the fiat-backed market, so to speak, or again, it's still very much a competition. And we admire, most of the competitors that are in the market today run really fantastic businesses. We are the only independent stablecoin in the world. So we're the only one that is not owned or controlled by an exchange. And that's allowed us to invest really heavily in the user experience, but to do so in a different way than our competitors. And I think this is why the market has been choosing us. And what I mean is we tend to invest heavily in whatever is going to be best for the user, not relating to us. Like, we don't have a platform, right? So we don't have a dog in the fight, so to speak. We just want to make sure that they have the broadest range of services and wallets, exchanges. So we're dedicated to maximizing the value that anyone holding TrueUSD can realize. Whereas many other tokens, they're trying to kind of lock you into an ecosystem of their services and their exchange, for example, things like that, because that's the only way that they, that's how they make money. That's what's in their best interest. Whereas everything we do is in our users' best interest. That's always what we're thinking of. So that's really helped us differentiate so far.
Got it. And then here comes the question. How do you then make money as a company?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so there's a couple different ways we make money today. We do have a trading desk, and that's necessary when it comes to things like OTC trading or providing liquidity, things like that. And so that is one source. We also are developing relationships with other platforms. Nexo is actually a great example, where we want to vet our platform. There's so many partners and so many companies that are putting together crypto investments all around the world that it's important to us that we only work with the top 1%, the best companies that we believe in and that we can endorse. And when we do, we want to earn, affiliate revenue. And this is a similar model to, mint.com or a lot of traditional players like Credit Karma who refer you to, let's say, credit card companies or lending companies, and then they earn a percentage of the return. So we're setting up similar relationships with the companies that we work with, and we plan to generate some affiliate revenue. And then lastly, we make money on the float of TrueUSD that we hold. So we generate interest on the float, and that's it. So those are the main methods today. Where we tend to think it's better that we're transparent than many other companies who the way they make money is a little bit unclear, and they maybe don't want the public to know. But we want to make sure that we're well aligned with all of our customers.
So I want to just get back a little to something that you mentioned, that you're actually thinking of and exploring ways to cooperate with DAI. Now, intuitively, one would think that since DAI is a stablecoin, they should be more of a competitor to us, to you. So could you talk to me a little about how do you see your relation to them?
Yeah. So we see them more as both a partner and a valuable part of the ecosystem. We think that consumers, they appeal to different consumers than we do, and they also allow for different use cases than we do. We might be the better choice if you're a Forex company or you're a business that's doing remittances. or an individual, if they want to actually, they hold US dollars, but they want to, but they don't have access to traditional US banking or traditional US bank account, we're clearly the better choice for someone like that. However, if you're a consumer that, likes the idea of holding a stable currency that's not tied to any government, and so therefore it's like truly independent, similar to Bitcoin, but you want the stability. I think, Maker is clearly the better choice in that regard. And so, I look at myself as a consumer, and I genuinely do use TrueUSD to generate returns on my dollars, but I actually also hold a balance of DAI. And there's certain instances where it makes sense to use it. So we believe that two great projects is better for the space than one. And so that's that seems clear.
Okay, but one sec. Sorry, I'm thinking out loud here. But the
Sure.
DAI is essentially pegged to the US dollar today, right? Or that's what they're aiming for. That's why they were even, I know they had this problem of, because the DAI is sometimes lower than $1 that's traded. So they're, discussing how they can solve this. So it's still $1 today, right?
Yep. Yeah, that's right. It's the difference though is it's not redeemable for the dollar. So it might be pegged to the dollar, but there are many currencies around the world that are pegged to the dollar, but that doesn't make them a dollar. The example I guess I would give you is like think like a CFO, or think like a merchant, and if you need dollars or want dollars, and you need to pay your suppliers, and they only want to deal with dollars, it's not good enough to say, hey, I'll give you this instrument that is pegged to the dollar. That they want to know it actually is a dollar. And in the instance of TrueUSD, for all intents and purposes, it is a dollar. Like you have a legal claim on a dollar that is sitting in a bank account. There will always be one-to-one parity. And we just launched a real-time platform with a top 25 US accounting firm, that this real-time dashboard shows you that every single TrueUSD is backed by $1 one-to-one, and it shows that information in real time. So you can go and you can look at this dashboard and you can see for yourself that you really are holding a US dollar.
So how often, I'm thinking, like, because that's a lot of the concern. I guess you introduced this because a lot of people are asking, hey, do you actually have the dollars? As as it has been the question with Tether for a very long time. So I imagine somebody guarantees, somebody audits, or how does this work?
Yeah. So what I was just explaining is we recently announced this. It wasn't that long ago, actually. It was just about less than 10 days ago. So previously, we had been posting PDFs of attestations, which is, it's a form of an audit, with a third-party accounting partner, where they would review our funds that we hold in all of the various escrow accounts for TrueUSD, and then they'd compare that to the number of tokens in circulation. And then they'd issue a report confirming that it was one-to-one. However, this new product, this big innovation, is that we are going to be launching a real-time dashboard. And again, it's built by and managed by a third-party accounting firm that will show in real time that it's one-for-one. So instead of, once a month seeing a report, you're going to actually see minute to minute, you can see that it's always one-for-one, and you'll see it go up and go down as people purchase, new tokens or redeem tokens for the underlying dollars. You'll be able to see the reserves.
Got it. All right. That's pretty cool. Looking forward to it. Another topic that I would be curious to learn more and to hear your thoughts about is money laundering. Now, you know that in the traditional media, the whole crypto space basically has the reputation of, hey, this is a place where mostly criminals and people with nefarious activities are operating. They're the guys who are working with crypto. So what is TrueUSD doing to are you doing something to make sure that TrueUSD is not used for money laundering?
Yeah, good question. The money laundering is something we take very, very, very seriously. We have a fantastic legal and compliance team here. Our head of compliance was formerly, she led compliance at Coinbase, and she has been building, a bank grade, or to be totally honest with you, better than bank grade anti-money laundering and KYC infrastructure and program. And the reason we know it's better is because we work with a lot of banks, and when when we compare our programs, ours is actually more thorough than many of the banks we work with. And so towards that end, we take our position very seriously in terms of, the only way that someone can redeem TrueUSD, so pull dollars out of the system, or put dollars in, is if they pass our anti-money laundering check. So, that's the first thing you interact with when you're in our app, is you have to pass that identity verification. And as part of that process, we're looking for the telltale signs of money laundering. So they're doing things like looking at, the source of funds, what they want to use it for, the history of the company, who owns it, things like that. And they're looking for any sort of red flag and comparing against all of the national databases to ensure that we are maintaining a high standard. So that's like one, that is a big part of our program. But we're also working on some pretty revolutionary technology that's going to be doing a bit more of on-chain analytics to help identify money launderers that way. So we're looking at both, and we think that that's really what the future looks like, is using both traditional methods and on-chain methods to prevent money laundering. Because the things no one wants is funds being used by terrorists to carry out attacks, or funds being used by criminal organizations. And so we take that very seriously.
Right. And I would be actually very, very excited and very curious to learn more about this technology that you are working on, because once it's ready, because I think it's a really kind of overplayed issue, because that there's been numerous reports where actually there's such vast amounts of money that's been laundering through the traditional banking system compared to the whole crypto market cap. That is just astounding. And I'm sure what you said, that with the transparency and the publicity and the trackability of public blockchains, I'm sure that over time such technologies will eventually be built, which will actually decrease significantly or make it even impossible for money laundering to happen at all.
Yeah. No, I actually agree with you completely. I think I actually laugh when people tend to ask about, oh, well, crypto is synonymous with money laundering. And the reason I find it funny is because I think people don't realize how much money laundering is happening in the traditional banking system. And a lot of it is even perpetrated and or involves many of the banks that are supposed to be preventing it. And when it comes to something like TrueUSD or a US dollar-backed stablecoin, the technology that's available is far superior for preventing criminals from using it. So I actually think if I were a criminal, just totally honest, if I were a criminal, sure, I would maybe look at using something like Monero or something like that. That's like privacy technology, and like, by the way, not to call out any of the privacy coins, because I think that's actually a very valuable service to society. But it's very different than something like TrueUSD. I think you'd be foolish to use TrueUSD or a similar fiat-backed stablecoin for money laundering, because your transactions are public and forever available to law enforcement. So I think it would be a little bit silly. And we would cooperate if there was an investigation. We would cooperate with the appropriate authorities if it's within our jurisdiction, obviously. So sure. If there was a U.S. law enforcement came to us, we would cooperate. And so we don't want our users thinking otherwise. Like, we have their best interests in mind, and so we want to make sure that criminals, terrorists, etc., aren't able to use our technology towards their gain.
Right. No, that makes total sense. Okay, so I want to briefly touch on. I'm looking at your website right now as we're speaking, and I'm seeing like basically that your planning or your vision is to eventually be able to tokenize all kinds of different assets, right? From the traditional ones, like I imagine what's coming up is probably currencies. Like you currently have the euro here, you have gold, silver, commodities, but you also have securities, essentially small businesses, stocks, bonds, and even crazy stuff such as movies, books, TV shows, music, and patents. Like, can you just share a bit on that?
Sure. The way we think of it is like part of our responsibility is to evangelize the possibilities and evangelize the potential futures that are available when it comes to tokenization, which is really just another word that represents securitization. It's just securitization that is done on a blockchain. We think, obviously we list all these different use cases and these assets, but we've come to believe more and more that this market is going to start with small niche markets that are currently not being well served by the public equities and public markets and that ecosystem. So, I can name a few examples, but we think it all starts with, these small niches and then builds from there. And I think eventually, to the consumer, I don't think actually the consumer necessarily needs to care that it's a token like a security token, or it's a stock, quote unquote, because all that really matters to them is that they're able to access the investments that they want. And so I think eventually, even if the technology is adopted, which I believe it will be by, companies like NASDAQ and ICE, who owns New York Stock Exchange, et cetera, I think that, the difference will be that anywhere in the world, when people are attempting to make these investments, it's just going to be more affordable, faster, and there might even be portability where they can carry their investments with them, and they're not, stuck with one exchange or another exchange. They can actually carry their investments with them. So I think that the future, is exciting from a technologist standpoint and from a more democratization standpoint, in the sense that it'll be available to more people. But I don't think people need to know what technology is running on the back end. And that's our job, is to kind of actually make it so seamless that people don't even think about the technology behind it.
Got it. And so in the near term, I imagine you'll be working on commodities and currencies, or just currencies.
In the short term, we are very focused on currencies and potentially commodities. I think in the mid to long term, it's going to shift towards securities, and I think that infrastructure is being built out, as we speak. But I think it could be a number of years before it reaches mainstream adoption.
Just want to take a quick break here from Tory and let you know that since this episode was recorded a couple of weeks back, the Trust Tokenization Platform has already released their second stablecoin, which is a TrueGBP, essentially bringing the British sterling pound onto the blockchain as a stablecoin. This is the first ever project to bring the British pound on the blockchain. So if interested, definitely go and check this out on Google or on trusttoken.com. So with that in mind, I wanna come to a few final questions I have. So in this talk, I love paying tribute to people who have kind of inspired our guests, to enter the crypto space, to become excited about Bitcoin and blockchain. So in that sense, is there any particular person or any particular content creator or any particular thing that you read which made you excited about crypto, the blockchain space, and Bitcoin?
Yeah. Well, it might sound cliche at this point, but for me, it was also Satoshi Nakamoto and the Bitcoin Whitepaper, which I randomly stumbled upon in college after somebody tweeted about it, and that was when you look at it, it's a masterpiece in terms of it really was a viral idea and viral concept that managed to transmit itself across millions of people, and I was one of those people. It's that really kicked off my journey.
Okay, and second question here is, who's the one person or a couple of people that you follow today, that you read until this very day, that you listen to, watch, or you keep learning from? People that you respect and that myself and our audience can learn from as well.
Yeah, I'd highly recommend following Arjun Balaji. I think he's one of the best writers in the space, and I think he does a great job of being very, even in the sense that he shows both sides of many issues, and I think his predictions are always really fascinating to follow. I'd also suggest following I follow people in other spaces, but I'd also, if you're just getting exposed to the space now, one of my favorite books to recommend to people is Crypto Assets, the Innovative Investor's Guide, and that's by Chris Berniski and Jack Tarter, and I love that book. It's very, for someone that's maybe an expert in the space, you might not learn a lot, but it does offer the perspective, an investor's lens for the space. And for those that are just getting started, I think it's one of the best introductions to the space. Okay.
Haven't had the time to check it out, so I'll definitely do, and I'm sure some of our listeners will. And one more question I have here is, does a company come to mind, or a crypto project which you want to succeed? Because if it becomes successful, it will have a positive impact on what you're doing at the Trust platform.
Yeah. I mentioned them earlier, but I do think that Maker was one of those projects that has a huge impact and can have a huge influence on the security token space. Because if you think about it, any security token that we create can potentially be used to create as part of a multi-collateral for the new DAI. So almost anyone can get leverage on their assets, which is a big deal. If you have let's say a token that represents equity in your home, you can pull capital out using multi-collateral DAI. And not every country has access to home equity lines of credit or things like that. So I think that's a very powerful innovation, and I think that'll unlock a lot of value across hard assets once they're represented in a token form.
Okay, and finally, where can people learn more about you and about the Trust Tokenization Platform? Where can they follow you?
Yeah. I'd love for you to, check out TrustToken.com. We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you want to buy TrueUSD, it's app.trusttoken.com. And for me personally, you can find me on Twitter. I'm not super active, but I am responsive, and that's at the Tory. So that's TheeTory. And feel free to shoot me a DM or chat anytime. And that's the best way to get in touch.
Awesome, Tory. Thanks again for your time. I think it was an exciting talk. Definitely some valuable insights here. I look forward to see further developments in the Trust Tokenization Platform, and maybe we can do that again after some time.
Yeah, would love it.
A couple of things before you take off. First, if you enjoyed this episode, be generous and share it with your best friends. They deserve it, they will appreciate it, and they will be grateful to you. Second, I named this podcast Borderless Crypto because I have been fascinated by the speed with which crypto has been breaking financial borders. Just like the internet empowered us to communicate and share information with anyone, anywhere, 24/7, 365, crypto is empowering people of any country to transact freely, to invest in all sorts of assets, and to access capital to grow their economic status. I'm super pumped to be part of this financial transformation. That is why I'm doing this podcast, to spread awareness about crypto and to accelerate the removal of economic borders. If, like me, you want to see a borderless financial world, help me spread the word about crypto even faster by spending 1 minute to rate this podcast, write a review, and subscribe, so that more people learn about crypto, and in this way, together with you, we accelerate crypto adoption. Finally, if you have any suggestions, feedback, or anything you want to tell me, send me a message on my Twitter handle at borderlessbtc. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you soon again.